What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Ham Radio Crash Course. Welcome to Saturday. Today, a kind of a look back at some discussions we made about emergency communications and what we've learned over the years, looking back at recent disasters and the response from amateur radio. So we're going to get started real soon. Hang tight, enjoy the memes, and I'll see you in a second. Well, hello, everybody. Coming to you from sunny California. We are about one day into the torrential downpour that we were promised this week. And yeah, it hasn't, there's no sun, all clouds, all rain. And for California, particularly Southern California, that's an interesting thing. But it reminds me of kind of this same time last year, actually. We did a live stream, really good conversation that we had with Thomas Witherspoon and Dan. It's not Dan Mark, it's Dan Gitro. And I'll just play some of it, and you guys can hear it.
Because we were sitting there having lunch at one of my favorite spots over by Thomas's house that I miraculously survived. He was telling me this, and I was getting goosebumps knowing that, here I'm just talking to these folks, trying to give them an outlet of, hey, what do you need? We'll help you. And what's your location? Do you have water? Do you have this type of stuff? And they were listening, writing that all down and giving that to the private pilots. And I want to make this very clear right now. In the early days, there was no help from any agencies. There was no feds here. The state government was 24, 48 hours away. We had nothing. Everybody was on their own. And it was amazing just to see how much local people that have helicopters and airplanes that could fly in these small little airports deliver supplies. It was simply amazing.
Yeah, it was a really huge operation in terms of it's amazing to see, especially even just a few days into it, all of these coordinated efforts happening kind of individually, but they were effective, and the repeater, I can't stress enough being on this end where really our whole community, the only way we could communicate really was through that repeater for our needs. That was the only way. It was how I did the wellness checks and all those other things. I got messages from people on the road. All that was done through the repeater. Even after we were a week into it, there's a site not too far from the Harley-Davidson site, in fact, which is just across the interstate. If you lived here, you'd know, but really close by, within a quarter of a mile of the Harley-Davidson site, a whole other site, which is basically a bunch of churches and other organizations that got together, and they have like a really big operation for distributing goods. And some of those people came up our road on ATVs and UTVs and things, and were asking to help. And they said, hey, we're just looking, we were denying them, saying, look, we're good right now. Go help other people. And they said, well, everybody's telling us that now. We don't know where to go. And I said, I'll find you places to go. And so I got a text message, and I said, I'll just make a couple calls. And so I got on the repeater, but also just listening to the repeater, you would know where supplies were needed. And then I could contact them, and then they would know where to take things. And that worked out really, really well, because after a disaster, and I think I kind of knew this beforehand, but it's hard to believe. It's hard to believe, first of all, that the cell phone service would just fail as quickly as it did.
Right?
I mean,
yeah,
really.
Sure. So there's kind of the idea, right? So we have many examples, and by the way, it's Gitro, Dan Gitro. Thank you. Sorry about that, Dan. So emergencies happen, and hams are there, right? Whether they get themselves to a disaster or inevitably there are disasters that happen, and hams are available. And these could just be small disasters, like someone is in a very remote area and they get lost and they happen to have a radio, or there's a ham who stumbles upon a hiker who's fallen and hurt themselves. So there's examples of these. Yeah, there's examples all over the place of this. And then, of course, there's major, huge disasters where amateur radio operators are either brought in or, again, they're there and they just rise to the occasion. So today's talk is really just going to be about breaking down some of these. And I've got some links. A lot of them are already in the video description, so you can go check that out. But I thought we would approach this from kind of a two-pronged effort. I've not really explored it this way, so I think it should be interesting and fun. So hopefully we'll all have a little bit of fun. But anyway, go check out hamtactical.com. Support to the Ham Radio Crash Course. Would appreciate you taking the time to do that. It is our merch store. Help support the channel. And as always, a huge thank you to all the members that popped up. We got like a ton of people that jumped in and joined us as members on on the channel. So it means a lot. Thank you so much. But let me pull up some slides here, and we'll work through this. And it's going to be kind of a multi-pronged effort as we pull up links to go along with some of this stuff, because we've got a lot of content to talk about. So how to use ham radios in an emergency. And yeah, we're going to talk about the actual using, but we're going to do it through how it was used historically, and then what you can do to kind of rise to that same level of capability. Okay, that's kind of going to be the goal here. It's not just going to be me saying, hey, yeah, you should definitely do this. I haven't been in an amateur radio emergency. I can't think, no, I never really had to make a call for somebody who had hurt themselves or gotten lost or anything like that. So yeah, this is really going to be using the historical examples that hams have given via the things that they've done and what we know from historical examples. So yeah, thank you, Baron Von Jace. Thank you, the Gray Man Poda. Thank you for Tierney. Thank you so much for the super chat. Appreciate you. Yeah, that's super awesome. So the next way we're going to break this down is, I think a good way to look at this is group organized emergency response and then independently organized group response to an emergency. And yeah, they're kind of different things. And while it may use similar gear, the skill sets might be slightly different, and what you actually do in those spaces will be different as well. And then we'll talk about what you can actually do to be prepared, and then what gear you might want to drag out there or use at home. Thank you, Chris, for joining us on the membership team there on YouTube. Thanks a lot. So group organized, I would break this down into kind of the two major areas. I know there are more than that. And again, there should be links in the video description. And these slides will go up for the patron members. If they are so inclined, they will be available for them there. But group organized are things like the Aries group, right? And the Races group. And what are they? Well, I should have a link here, hopefully. Well, no, I don't. So we can just click these guys. Let's see. Yeah, let's bring that guy up there. So Aries is, right, the amateur radio emergency service that is kind of sponsored by the ARRL. And there are a number of groups. You can click that little Find Now button. In fact, I'll drop the link so you can check it out. But yeah, this is a volunteer group, and they do a number of things, usually community-related based off of where the group is located, right? So Races works very similar, but they're funneled through Department of Homeland Security, or is it DTS? No, it's Department of Homeland Security. So keep that in mind. They're two separate groups. They do similar things, but they have kind of different core functions, if you will. Similar. They end up doing similar things, but yeah, keep that in mind. So these groups are volunteers. They bring their own equipment. They support municipal events. Municipal, of course, meaning your local community, your city, county, that kind of stuff. They also simulate emergencies as training exercises, right? So they will go through, in fact, Amanda from Ham Nation just went through one of these where they controlled a changing emergency environment, right? Where they had different things that would happen, some kind of initial disaster, but then there'd be like modification cards where, oh, now you got no power. Get out your solar panels, your batteries, etc. How are you going to deal with that, right? So they'd kind of throw a card on the play or on the field, and then you'd have to modify things to support that. Examples of the operations that historically groups like this do is, as an example, they might attend a race and be stationed along a distance race. Like, example, Baker to Vegas. Baker is a town in California, and there is a race, a foot race, usually ran by first responders and police, where they run from Baker all the way to Las Vegas. And if you've ever taken that drive before, it's a pretty serious drive. It's hot, and it's also remote with very little communication. Cell phones don't really work in that stretch between Baker and about Prima Donna, Nevada. So they have these amateur radio stations kind of segmented out, and they track when runners pass through them, almost like checkpoints, and the radio operators do that. Well, how would that relate to an emergency situation? Oh, my volume is low. Thank you. Let's see. A skosh. Let's skosh it up. Hold on. Let me see. Thank you. I'm skoshed all the way up. You gotta skosh up your own side. Skosh it up on your end there, bud. So you would have these segmented tables and units of hams or whatever, then they'd be reporting back information. Well, in an emergency situation, that might look like the entrance of an evacuation shelter or a area where people go to meet back together, right, in certain things. Like Red Cross will run these. Or it could be at a hospital, some kind of an EOC, an emergency response location, right, where they are coordinating a lot of the effort. So they practice that via things, municipal events, races, whatnot. So census tracking at shelters, historically something that is done as well, moving that information back and forth. And why are they depending on amateur radio operators? Well, it's because they have no wireless communication otherwise. The internet is down, power is down. Traditional forms of communication go down in these type of emergency situations. And so folks like this who are running with these Yaesu radios and got their computer set up, they have the ability to communicate between locations, between hams, and get that information across, right? They'll also handle traffic, and we're going to talk a little bit about what that traffic looks like in a little bit, but it could be evacuation of people off of the roof from a flood, right? They'll get the information from the first responders that they're deployed with, and then that can get back to an aid station, an evacuation center, a hospital. You get the idea. And then ICS forms. So this is one of the things that is going to vary from what you might expect with a like a person, an individual preparedness sense. ICS forms are going to be more in line with what first responders use, particularly in an emergency situation. So a lot of the traffic will be in a standardized format called an ICS form, and two of those examples are the 205 and the 213 form, which I think I have linked in the video description, but if I don't, I have it on the web here that will pull it up. So some historic examples of amateur radio operators in a group-type organization responding to disasters, both man-made and natural. In 9/11, right, Aries and Races were both deployed. Hams were placed at these key locations. There was some at Ground Zero, at Red Cross shelters, hospitals, and they filled the communication holes where you needed to get from Ground Zero to an evacuation center or to a hospital or to a shelter. The signals were dead in New York. While some were still getting stuff out, it took them a really long time to be able to communicate. To make a phone call, it could take 10 minutes to get an actual connection because everything was completely swamped and they had damage to the system, so infrastructure was completely inundated. Well, what worked even between buildings? Amateur radio worked. And how did they do that? Literally via their voice, communicating over microphone, usually over FM, VHF, UHF radio, so handhelds and mobile radios. Tierney with a super chat. Thank you, Tierney. Glad we are doing this today. I was at the towers on 9/11, and that's part of the reason I got into ham radio. Comms were down, and hams were setting up card tables on the sidewalk with their gear. That's right, and I believe it went so far as when they were deploying, they had to provide their own PPE, personal protection equipment. They had to have their own water and snacks because they were running 12-hour shifts, at least in the stories that I read. And one of those stories is linked in the video description. If you'd like to read along as we go through some of this, you can, but it's a great read, and it's a great historical reference for something we should keep in mind. Katrina, right? Coordinated effort among multiple radio groups to assist in fast water rescue, and you can see fast water rescue. If you've ever listened to my podcast that I do with my wife, I am pretty humble most of the time, but I am a good swimmer. I'm a dang good swimmer. I played water polo as a kid. I swam all the time. I am comfortable in the water. Ocean, pool, doesn't matter. Lake, whatever. I don't mess around with fast-moving water. Fast-moving water scares me because I know how powerful water is. And flood situations like Katrina, after everything that I've seen after hurricanes and everything, like the floods in Texas, which are freak me out. So the people that are deployed in fast water rescue situations, incredibly dangerous. And there were hams that were working with those crews to evacuate people. Manuel, I got it. I got it. And hopefully tonight we're going to record the podcast, and I will I'll have my opening, so you'll hear me opening. I got your message. message received, buddy. Thank you. So fast-moving water I messed around with, and there were multiple hams that were supporting that effort and getting people evacuated off the top of roofs, a number of things that were all incredibly dangerous after Hurricane Katrina. But then 2025, this year, hams deployed with the flood rescue teams, and they stayed at the Red Cross reunification centers. Wireless networks were knocked out from the flood. So what did people depend on? They depended on amateur radio. Not all of it. First responders have their own communication capabilities. First responders have their own radio systems, of course. But amateur radio can interrupt with all these different things. We can go usually a little bit further in some cases, depending on the infrastructure buildup. And obviously, we have the interoperability between bands, so 2 meters, 70 centimeter. But, we can go higher than that into the 900s. We can go lower than that into 10 meters, into various other places, including HF, which is one of the advantages. So independently organized. So there's Dan again. Dan got that radio because of his stellar work as one of the primary net op during Hurricane Helene. Now, I have talked about this a ton on my channel. Obviously, this was like a year ago, so this could be fresh to some of you. But if you weren't following what had happened in North Carolina after Hurricane Helene, the hurricane wasn't, I don't know if it was the worst hurricane ever experienced in that area. I actually don't know that fact. But what I can tell you is it dumped a lot of rain. And what happened was that rain, starting up at the high level in the mountains of North Carolina, washed everything out. Roads, power lines, communication lines. It basically took them all back almost to to medieval days, right? Because you have no infrastructure. It took out fresh water, power, all your utilities gone, and the ability to freely travel, like bring in trucks with equipment, supplies, took it all out. Well, there was a very well-placed repeater. N2GE owned it on Mount Mitchell. It was at 6,500 plus feet. It was only running 15 watts, but it had the best coverage, better than just about anything else in the area. And Dan, along with the locals, 5 watt output. Was it 5 watt or 15 watt? I think it's 5 watt. Regardless, incredibly low. Super low. It didn't matter. It was the height, right? It was the height that they were in and the prominence kind of that they had. They coordinated both the evacuation of people, the health and wellness of people, the figuring out what people needed for supplies. Airdrops were being coordinated. They were literally doing airdrops into a Harley-Davidson parking lot in town to be able to get supplies to people. And yes, there were first responders there, but I think this is the most beautiful example of how, with communication, they were able to quell the rumors and the fear and the paranoia by coming together as a community. And that was able to be done because of amateur radio, facilitated over amateur radio and folks like Dan, right? Incredibly amazing. So regardless of our planning, whether we're like, nope, I'm gonna get my orange vest and I'm gonna be an emergency response person. If you use the radio, if you use a repeater or have used a repeater or talk on simplex or worked HF nets, then you've got the same skills as Dan here, right? Dan was not a net operator, right? And what's a net, right? In case we got new folks that didn't know what this is. A net op is somebody who is like the traffic control person on a repeater during a communication period where they're receiving traffic from people and they're sending traffic out using the repeater. Having a net op is incredibly important because you need someone that can kind of take charge and say, okay, we are looking for anybody who's in need of assistance. And then they'll wait and they'll take people and then they'll immediately try and help them out. And while they're helping them out, they'll stop and say, hey, is call sign so-and-so on the air? This individual's looking for help and you're in their area. Can you drive over there and see if they need help or get them a case of water, whatever? So the net op is kind of the person that does that. And Dan here filled out legal pads of call signs and names and notes, pathways that were open or would have been opened in this area that, again, completely washed out, right? So Thomas Witherspoon was higher up on the mountain. And yes, that is the same Thomas Witherspoon, K4SWL, here on YouTube. You can go back and watch some of his videos and his kind of personal podcasts that he was doing during this period. And he was completely cut off. They had to take chainsaw crews and go through and carve up all the trees that had not only fell over and then washed out the road, they kind of barricaded everything up. So you couldn't drive in and out. There was no getting out of that. It was hard work getting people in and out of that. And for Thomas, a lot of that communication was facilitated via amateur radio handhelds. But for Dan here, who is about 100 miles outside of the disaster area, but still had really good view into the Mount Mitchell repeater, he ran net control. So he was actually outside of the primary disaster area and provided his assistance, right? So Dan, like I mentioned, fantastic job. N2GE having a really great repeater. Not much power at all, but absolutely killed it because of where it was located. And also its power. We'll talk about power in a little bit. But yeah, Cody, shout out for K4SWL, also handed out his own HDs to give to members of community so that they could communicate in the valley. Yeah, so they're like going up the valley, down the valley, back up and forth, blah, 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 to get people what they needed and really get the detritus out of the way. So you're talking chainsaw crews, long hours to kind of unbury themselves from the natural wildlife that just came blasting in on them because of the floods. Incredibly crazy. So a independently organized group could be around a repeater like Mount Mitchell. It could be your family unit. It could be your rod and gun club. It could be any number of things. What you do with your friends, your family, your extended family. That could be your independently organized group. So to a ham, though, what does this often look like for someone that's looking for help? Well, it's receiving a call for help and passing the traffic to another mode of communication is most likely what you're going to see. So you could be out hiking, someone falls, and maybe not even break a leg, just a horrible sprain, just a really bad sprain that they can't put much weight on it. Well, you might have to call search and rescue volunteers to help them out. Come kind of get what do they call that? Oh, that thing that Adam always talks about. It's like the little bed that they strap them into, and they've got little hooks, and they pull them up and crib. It's not a crib. Somebody will know in the chat. But yeah, they may have to come and crib them up and drag them out, right? Because they can't self-rescue themselves, right? So what would that look like? You find the person, they fell down, they're halfway. A litter, that's it. Got it. Thank you, Gray Man. Oh, a couple of people. It's a litter. That's it. Nailed it. Not a basket. Just get into basket. Get into basket and I'll drag you up the hill. So you're at the halfway point of a trail and you're like, oh man, this person's messed up. Here's a bottle of water. I got to get up to the top of this hill so that I can get a signal out. And then you may talk to somebody on a local repeater or over simplex or heck, I don't know, maybe even APRS to say, hey, I need help really bad via emailing your wife via APRS. I don't know. Or doing WinLink, right? There's a myriad of ways that you could communicate. But that's what happens a lot for individually supporting people at a time of an emergency is that they stumble upon someone either physically, like hiking around, or they happen to be at a car crash where they're in an area where the wireless communications is down, gone, whatever. And then they end up needing to use their radio to help facilitate communications. And so that usually, again, amateur radio is really good at filling those holes. If you're in the middle of a city and everything's great, then you don't have any holes. You've got your cell phone services from multiple companies that all have, great communication lines and everything works. But if you're just outside that area and you can't get wireless signal, well, that's when amateur radio comes in really helpful. So then, yeah, simply lending a hand, right? Hands with good mobile radio gear, the right equipment, and skills going to people in need and helping. And I have a couple examples of that as well from the historic standpoint, right? So this is more of a community coming together, not necessarily an organization, although, of course, organizations were involved, but there's a community aspect to this, like Hurricane Helene, right? So thanks to a well-positioned repeater, flood victims were able to coordinate the entire emergency effort for evacuations, wellness checks, airdrops, maintaining community cohesion. There was little to no communications outside of ham radio for the community after the time of the event, which was a big deal. Puerto Rico in 2017, The hams coordinated there to rebuild their infrastructure, right? They had repeaters and antennas, both for first responder radio systems that the hams might not have operated on, but also their own repeaters that they were rebuilding antennas for to be able to communicate again. And so hams were at the hospitals, municipal centers, hams deployed with the first responders and the utility teams to rebuild the communities. Now, that could just be they don't really have an Aries or Races group. I don't know. But more hams, individual hams working together, ham radio club, that kind of thing. Not so much an emergency response club, but you get what I'm talking about. Crestline, California, and this is actually a picture of, I think, really the only supermarket in Crestline. This is after the really crazy blizzard that they got hit with. That roof is caved in. You might not be able to tell that. There's a couple of timbers that are shorn off there, but that is a caved-in roof from the snow, the impact of the snow. In fact, I have a couple more pictures of that. Hopefully I can find them very quickly. But yeah, my dad's in Big Bear, which is a little bit further out from Crestline, but it was so bad that he was basically snowed in. Many people were snowed in, and it was a record level of snowfall beyond what they had ever seen. Well, you're like, oh, people get snowed in all the time. Yes and no, right? So this is beyond what their capability to actually get the snow out was even capable of. And we're talking above, the heads of tall adult males. They had to dig people out. They had to dig an hour or more from the driveway or from the road into somebody's door to evacuate like an elderly woman. There was a couple of cases of that. And amateur radio was there to help coordinate that because a lot of that was community supported. Because if you think of how widespread that blizzard was, it took a while for that heavy equipment to get into Crestline. They had to go through a lot of San Bernardino, which was also impacted by the blizzard, to even get there. And so by the time they got there, well, that's days in, and they've already got to pull people out, help them out, do what they got to do. So it's, hams helping hams, right? How'd they do that? FM voice, right? FM voice repeaters, simplex communication. That's how they did it. Nothing more complicated than that yet, right? As a byproduct of North Carolina, Hurricane Helene, and the response of amateur radio, they saw a growth of 80% new licenses in 2024, which is the year that this all went down. Pretty crazy. I thought that was a fun little factoid, so I threw that in. So how do we prepare, right? Use the dang radio should be the point of note here, right? We want to use our radios actually to communicate to people. And it might sound mundane. You're like, but Josh, I don't like to talk. Well, that's okay. If you have a friend group, you have a couple of people, or maybe you're just your family members, test the radios out with them. Try the radio programming. Make sure it all works with them, right? Because if you don't do that, it's going to be really hard in an emergency to try and be able to explain, here you go, honey, this is a radio, and be explaining to them in a time of emergency may not work, right? Program your radios. This sounds crazy, I know, but hear me out. You should have radios. If you're like me, you got a decent chunk of handhelds. They should be similarly programmed. If you find a programming set, you're like, this is a good set of repeaters in my area. Repeaters don't change all the time. It happens. But you should take that programming set and deploy it to all your radios or many of your radios so that if you had to depend, like Thomas Witherspoon did, by going and distributing radios out to neighbors, again, this is a full-on emergency. So he was justified in handing out locked-down radios to certain channels that were on the amateur radio frequencies to people that were not licensed, right? Because, again, full, real emergency. Life is on the line. There's people that couldn't get fresh water for days after Hurricane Helene had damaged the area so much that, yeah, they had to start working together, particularly as they're hacking their way out with chainsaws to get vehicles in and get people out that needed medical assistance, right? So have your radios programmed. Know how to do it by hand, right? And that goes to the next point. Know their use. Know the radio's use. If you can't program your radio by hand to change channels, change your power output, scan for traffic, meaning hit the scan button and be able to listen, know what the difference is in the steps, right? In the steps between where it stops and listens for signals. Know how to change that. Know why you might need to change that. How to monitor the repeater input. Does everybody know how to do that? Does everybody know why you want to do that, right? What's a repeater, right? It's it's a repeater pair. It's two frequencies that are actually very close together. And normally when you're transmitting, you're on the transmit frequency. And when you unkey, you're listening on the receive frequency. Well, sometimes in an emergency, you may need to be able to listen to the input of that frequency if you're trying to find somebody, or if they need help physically they can't get anywhere. You may need to use the input frequency to hear their signal, and if you're getting closer or further away. Yes, direction finding, right? Why would that be useful? Well, someone's barricaded into something. They're stuck in the attic, and the bottom of the house is flooded out, and they can't punch through the roof, but maybe they have a radio, right? These are hypotheticals, but make a plan. Okay, going back. Know how to change your squelch. That's another thing, too. If you're talking on simplex and you got your squelch cranked up because you just normally talk to your buddy a mile away, well, in an emergency situation, you need to lower that squelch way down or turn it off completely so you might be able to hear those signals that are down in the noise. Something you need to know how to do. You should know how to do all of those things with your handheld, your mobiles, whatever radio you're using. And if you don't, make a cheat sheet. Rubber band it to the back of the radio and keep it so that, if you ended up having to hand some of these out, there's a little handy cheat sheet that goes along with them for those important features. What's the point of handing out a bunch of radios to somebody? You program them all for high power, and then they're all just dead in less than a day because people are squawking it out, but they really only needed extra low power because they're all within line of sight of each other within a small community. Important to know. Important to know why you would want to turn that down. Make a plan, right? Program multiple radios the same, right? And then ready with self-sustainable charging like solar, have cheat sheets, simple to advanced frequency plans, or simple or to advanced frequency plans. Let's splash in some simplex as well. So you might say on your comms plan, we'll start on channel 1. It could be a repeater. If we can't communicate, we're going to go to channel 2 after 5 minutes. And channel 2 might be 2 meter simplex, or maybe it's the adventure frequency, 146.580, which is going to be a little different. You could go deep with all of this, and your comms plan is going to be unique with your setup, your location, your geographic terrain, and all that stuff. But yes, you should sit down with your friends, your family, and say, okay, here's the radio, here's how they function. Can you even get to the point of walkie-talkieing these things? You can. Okay. Now I'm going to explain to you what a repeater is and how a repeater works. And hey, look, this is the Knott's Berry Farm repeater if you're here in Southern California. We're going to meet up on the Knott's Berry Farm repeater in a disaster. When the inevitable big one hits us again, we're all going to meet up on the Knott's Berry Farm repeater, right? That kind of thing. And then go from there. If you're on CB, use channel 6. And yes, while this is not a CB video, I am completely and totally in agreement that in a survival situation, cheat. If everybody's on GMRS, use GMRS. Don't walk around and go, well, it'd be a lot cooler if you were on amateur radio right now. Don't do that. Pick up your GMRS radio, pick up the CB, go to where the people are, or be willing to interrupt between those services. So if you needed an excuse to go buy a CB radio and a GMRS radio, having 50-watt GMRS mobiles in your home and a decent CB radio with a good antenna is an emergency preparedness prep, right? So there you go. I just was able to justify you going out and buying more radios. I've really changed. Yeah, CB is cool, man. CB is great. We should all be cool with other types of radio, all right? And then use and train, right? What is use and train? Well, it's practice your comms plan with your family and friends. Pick a day once a month to check the batteries, try and make a contact at a given time, right? That would be a great thing. Everybody get out your Google calendars. We're going to have a little meetup at 7 p.m. on Sunday, and we're just going to see if we can chit-chat on the radio, right? That's what we're going to do. Yeah, you can coordinate on the phone, right? For your first couple of ones. Who cares? Easy peasy, right? But then follow that up with when you're out hiking, you should be doing the wilderness protocol. So what's the wilderness protocol? A lot of you know this. I hit this, I bang this drum a lot, but so there are a lot of simplex calling frequencies. I'll just go ahead and just give you the cheat sheet here, the spoiler alert. 146.520 national calling frequency for amateur radio is going to be your bread and butter frequency when you're out in the wilderness and you want to try and make a simplex call with someone. everyone should be monitoring 146.520. If you have a dual channel radio, like you can dual watch, your primary single, always number one should be 146.520. Me personally, I use 146.520 and 146.580, which is the adventure frequency. I monitor both of those. And how you do it specifically is right here. Here's the schedule. This is the Wilderness Protocol. You're going to call or listen. And so what I generally do is at 7 a.m. to 7:05, I'm usually not up that early unless I'm backpacking, or 10 a.m. to 10:05, I say, hey, this is KI6NAZ, monitoring for Wilderness Protocol traffic. Anyone come now if you're in need of assistance. And you just do that throughout the period of the day, ending at 7 p.m. So there you go, 12-hour coverage. And that's exactly the Wilderness Protocol. So have your radio programmed with Simplex. You should have already done this. Chirp makes this easy, by the way. So everybody should program your radios for your local repeaters. As I've already mentioned, have a good set of local repeaters, but then put in all those simplex frequencies. And if your radio is open to different frequency mindsets, then you could probably also add some GMRS frequencies in there as well. MERS as well. All good things to have in your radio for an emergency purposes, okay? So regarding gear, right? So physical gear that you might want in the case of an emergency. I will say this up front. If you join a group like Races or Aries, or I think, was it Salvation Army or the Red Cross has Saturn, there's a number of communication emergency preparedness groups. Highly recommend that you just kind of go ahead and take the recommendations they have. So if they have a particular radio that they like to point people towards, then you should probably go with that stuff. It's going to help you out because you're all going to be on the same kind of set of equipment. Everybody will know how to interop with them, how to use them, how to get them fixed if programming got all messed up. So that's the way I would recommend you go. But the other thing that I like to remind people of, the PACE plan. I don't know what's going on in my front of my house, but everybody's freaking out. It looks like my son is home. God, the dog just lost their mind. But the PACE plan, primary, alternate, contingent, and emergency modes of communication. Okay? That doesn't mean I'm going to use my Kenwood to do VHF, UHF, and 1.2 meters. Well, that's primary, alternate, and contingent. No. It is primary, or your alternate, or your contingent, or your emergency. It's one. So there's 3 radios there that could be primary, alternate, contingent. Would I do it that way? No, I wouldn't, but that's the idea here. Want to remind people, they get this confused a lot, is that each thing is a redundant system in its own right. So what might that look like? What's a hypothetical PACE plan? Well, primary is going to be phone. By the way, something that was, I went back and I watched the live stream from last year earlier today as I was kind of getting ready for the live stream. And K4SWL, Thomas, had a really good reminder, right? So if we remember what they were going through, they lost all the wireless companies. They lost everything. I think T-Mobile started to bring in their little trailers with communication capability. But primarily, they were dead. They were dead in the water. What did they get access to eventually? Starlink. Well, Starlink offers Wi-Fi, not a cell phone service. So what they all needed to do was turn on Wi-Fi calling. And a lot of people found out that they had to activate the Wi-Fi calling through the cell phone network. They couldn't activate it by being on Wi-Fi. I don't know if that's changed, but that was as of a year ago. And he was reminding everybody, hey, whatever you do, the first thing for being prepared is turn on your Wi-Fi calling right now, because you could get access to Wi-Fi in a lot of cases easier than getting access to a mobile phone communication. So make sure you turn on the Wi-Fi calling. So there's your primary. That's your phone, your traditional way of communicating, your most comfortable way. Alternate. Well, in a disaster situation, My feeling is that local comms is best comms. Local comms is going to be the most important communication that you could be in. And the best kind of tried and true device for local communications is your mobile 50 watt or higher powered 2-meter 70 centimeter radio. As far as contingent, well, where I live, Meshtastic would be a really good contingent because we got a huge network. It's crazy fleshed out. We can communicate down to San Diego and up through up into Ventura County over Meshtastic, which is amazing. So Meshtastic would be a good contingent since a lot of the nodes are all solar. Perfect. They're already off grid. They're already redundant. And then as far as emergency is the last line of defenses. And maybe that's HF, right? Maybe that is, hey, I was just in the big one hit, our 9+.0 earthquake hit, and I really want to tell my family, up north or wherever they're at in Canada, that I'm okay. Can someone outside of the disaster help me out? And there are things like the Hurricane Watch Net for the people that actually experience severe weather that meet on 20 meters, 40 meters, and a number of other bands. 40 meters is probably the most prominent one. And you can get health and status out and in for checking on your loved ones, right? So maybe that's HF. Maybe that's not immediately after a disaster, but yeah, that would be on the list. By the way, I will take questions as we get to the end here. I'm going to try and wrap it up here in a little bit, but yeah, go ahead and drop some questions. Otherwise, if you want to talk with us about this topic, we'll be doing the Ham Radio Crash Course after chat after this live stream. It's a separate live stream. We'll be taking your Q&As. You guys, the first-timers, newbies with questions, you guys get the first priority. So link is in the video description. Go check that out. So mobile gear, mobile radios. Why do I like mobile radios in an emergency situation? Well, HTs are 5 watts, maybe some are 10 watts, but then battery starts to deplete, and then the power starts to drop. Whereas a mobile, oftentimes powered off of your vehicle, so you're using the gas, you're using the alternator of the vehicle to run it, or if you're an electric vehicle, well, that's a huge battery. But you get 50 watts or more. That's going to be way more effective than a handheld. A pretty decent chunk more powerful. And those usually go along with a much better antenna. The one thing that you can almost guarantee with mobile radios versus handhelds is that you will be using a much better antenna. Mobile radio antennas are usually tuned a lot better, while there's still resistance to having kind of dummy load antennas thrown on them. You won't blow them up necessarily, but they can utilize a lot better antenna and put a lot more power out. So that's a really good thing. The other thing with the mobile radios, crossband repeat. So crossband repeat is something where, say you had your HT and you needed to go do a health and wellness check. So you leave your mobile radio on in your truck or whatever, and you put it in crossband repeat mode. And so that truck radio is keyed up to talk to that repeater that everybody's been talking on, like the Mount Mitchell repeater, for instance. And then you have a handheld that's keyed to transmit into your mobile radio in the truck on a different frequency. And then that mobile radio transmits out into that repeater, crossband repeating. So you take your 5-watt handheld and you shoot it into the mobile takes that, shoots it out 50 watts. So you take your 5-watt, you get 50 watts out, which is a really, really handy thing, particularly if you're going to be close in and around your vehicle or you're within line of shot of the vehicle. Even a small radio like this on low power, you can run this for a real long time on low power and be able to talk through it, so long as your mobile radio can handle the extra strain of being a crossband repeating radio. There are videos out there. I've done one video on the 2730 talking about crossband repeat capability. If your mobile radio will do it, it's probably a good thing. And know how to do it. Don't just say, oh, my radio will do it, but then have no idea how to do it, because what happens if it's an emergency and you don't have the manual and you don't have the internet? What are you going to do then, huh? Well, you're not going to have crossband repeat. That's what's going to happen. Recommendations for simple and effective mobile radios, ICOM 2730. Pick your poison. They got that black screen, the ham sexy black screen, or just the traditional LCD screen. Very simple, very easy to use, very nice menu system. It does crossband repeat as well. I love mine. Sounds good. Yeah, what can I say? Real simple. For the tech nerds, I like the VGC N7600. It just came out. It's very tech nerd bro, so you will need like an Android device or an iPhone to get the most capability out of it. But it has a hand mic attached, and yes, they have an extension cable. I have the new extension cable for the 7600, so it exists. If you don't want to go with the Bluetooth wireless hand mic, they make an extension cable now. So I'll be running that probably in my truck in the near future. And then you get APRS. We haven't talked about ancillary modes yet, but APRS, confused individual on one of my comments on a video said APRS stands for Automatic Position Reporting System. No, they changed that. It's Automatic Packet Reporting System. APRS is a fantastic way of actually sending text messages to just local hams and being able to kind of go outside of the ham space into, texting, emailing, doing a number of other things with that bridging, so long as you have the internet, which again, you don't really have that in a disaster. But kind of points for the N7600 is it will leverage your cell phone so you can actually send SSTV with it. How interesting is that? I don't know. I can't think of, necessarily an emergency situation, but I did work on a project years and years ago on an Android app that would take a picture of something and send over direct line of sight signal images, much like SSTV. And it was supposed to be used in theater, like it was Iraq 2, Electric Boogaloo. And the idea is that if had somebody, you had no signal because your troops were all way out of comms range, you could take a picture of something, traditional comms, cell phones, whatnot. Like let's say you got injured, you take a picture of the injury, diagnosing the problem a little bit, and you could fire it back to the comms, the med station, whatever base, so they could be ready for the person that was hurt. Well, you could do the same thing with SSTV. Actually, really good use case there. Other good options are the ICOM 5100, although I will say we already saw the Tokyo Ham Fair. Possibly there's a new ICOM 5200 coming soon, so keep an eye out for that. And then, the Yaesu FTM series, they have like 5 or 6 different radios now, so you can almost pick any one that scratches your itch, and you're good to go. There's so many options, and those are good too. I have links in the video description on some places, actually DX Engineering, to go check them out. I tried to break them up a little bit simplistically, but those are my opinions. And yes, they have the new 2730 Black Screen Edition, or the B. Is that what it is? 2730 Bravo? Handheld radios. Okay, why carry a handheld? Well, go back to Thomas Witherspoon's example. He's in a chain gang with chainsaws, and they're trying to cut down the forest to extricate themselves from the disaster area or to get people in and out. And you probably need handheld radios to communicate back home, communicate down the mountain, ask for help. Hey, bring me a jerry can of gas. Myriad of other things. So handhelds, very helpful in a disaster. Generally, easy to power with all the plentiful USB-C charging options we have now, and can be very easy to program. Case in point, the Baofeng Mini, stupid easy to program now on the radio, but you should have chirp. You should have these radios programmed beforehand. Radios I would recommend, though, usually I will state up front if they're not easy to use or easy to program. I like simple radios a lot of times, unless I'm going to go full nerd out, and I'm pretty honest when I tell you I'm fully nerding out here, so keep that in mind. Now, as far as interoperability, I have found that generally HTs will offer modes of operation sometimes outside of FM, like APRS, for instance. I know that's still FM, but it's packetized radio. But you can do a number of other things. You usually find HTs that have like Bluetooth connection, wireless connection, GPS, and you get that in usually way more expensive mobile radios. Although the price of those handhelds are coming up dramatically, but a lot of that's not really needed in a disaster. You're looking for more robust and rugged, and that's the last point for what you should look for. Something with an IP rating, something that can actually be pretty much submerged, not too deep, but if it falls out of your pocket and falls into a puddle or falls into flood water, you probably don't want it to just be dead, right? You want a radio that can probably stand up to that. So maybe not fast-moving water, I get that. That's scary stuff. But yeah, so you want something with an IP rating. So what are a couple of good examples there? Well, oddly enough, one of the radios that Thomas mentioned, so sources him on this one, Yaesu FT60. Still really good radio, really good front end, a number of power options available for it. There are a number of new battery types that are out there. They make LiFePO batteries for the Yaesu FT60 now, which are really good. Makes it a little bit lighter too. And they're cheap. Right now it's on sale for $140. I think that's over $100, $150 cheaper than when I bought mine as my first radio. Bushel of Baofeng minis. You can buy these by the pair. Just buy a whole bushel of them. That's what you should do. Now, I can't comment on the submersible. I haven't tested that yet. I probably should sacrifice one to the water gods to see if it'll keep working. But if you do want something submersible, then the rest of these are going to be mainly focused in that. The VGC N76, which is my tan one, and this goes the same for the BTEC Pro. So this VGC radio, tested it, submersible. Yeah, so is the hand mic with this guy, the original. I haven't tested the one with the screen yet, but the original hand mic. Just throw that thing in the water. You're good. VGC N76, fantastic. No problem. Went straight into the water. You know I like to do tests like that. As far as other radios of good recommendation, the VX6R from Yaesu is on sale as well right now. So that's a real good one. That's a tri-bander, real small. If you're going to go with that one, go with the attachment, the Yaesu attachment for the swivel belt connector. Trust me when I say that. It's like less than $10. It's one of the best things you can buy. In fact, they make 3D prints now for a myriad of other radios to be able to adapt them to that Yaesu clip. It is awesome. In fact, I will wrap up this stream and I will go get it just to remind everybody how good it is. So come back to the after chat and we'll talk about that. The ICOM ID50, recommended because it is submersible. Recommended because it has a fantastic battery life, which you want in a disaster situation. But highly recommended that you use the dstar.info website for programming it. Once you do that, then you get a lot of value out of it with GPS and a number of other things that come out of it. But just keep that in mind. Yaesu FT5DR, also good, submersible. But do you really need, these two radios here for a disaster radio? Truth be told, no. Back to the bushel of Baofangs. Back to the FT60. Back to the VGC N76. And the myriad of Wouxun radios that are about $100, right? $100, good radios. Buy2wayradio.com. There's a link in the video description for them. You can grab just about any VHF, UHF, Wouxun handheld, and it's going to be a good radio. They're really, really good radios for amateur radio. So that's my those are my opinions there. Now HF, because I got to hit it, and then I think we're pretty much done. But why HF? Generally, for reaching out of an emergency to give out the health and status of the people that are inside the emergency, or to ask for help. Hey, we need more generators. I need a big old backhoe. I need an excavator, like ASAP. Who's got an excavator? Are you just going to scream into the ether? Probably not. And that's why this can be a middling answer, right? Don't know. It's like, sorry, this is Jerry in Toledo. Who am I talking to? And then you're in the middle of a disaster area. Or if you are at all following what's going on, shout out to everybody that's participating in the ARRL sweepstakes. It's a contest weekend. So if you get into an emergency, use the work bands if it's a contest weekend, right? Because you're probably not going to get out there. Maybe. I don't know. They might not stop long enough. They're going to give you a 5.9, and then they're not going to help you much more than that. Maybe. I know Hams will. Of course, Hams will do the right thing, but still, keep that in mind. And of course, if it's an emergency, are you really going to go set up an antenna, an HF antenna? Hold on, I got to go string my NFET out there. Another reason why mobile HF, mobile VHF, UHF is such a powerful situation in an emergency is, well, it's already there. It's already on your vehicle. The vehicle's nice and warm in a disaster situation, hopefully dry. And so you can have all this in your vehicle ready to go. So again, another excuse for loading up your vehicle with a really good VHF, UHF mobile, a really good CB, a really good MERS radio, a really good GMRS radio, and a really good HF radio. Now you got a porcupine vehicle, but you are prepared for any emergency situation that comes along. As far as recommendations go, G90, right? It's the cheapest radio you can probably get, if you have decent vision. I think that's the only downside. Advantage is it's got a Rockstar tuner in it, so a compromised antenna will work. But going back to, if your life is on the line, you probably don't want to use a compromised antenna unless you're required to tune up a grain silo. Not going to be the most value-added thing to do. This is the cheapest option that's going to be kind of like what I would call dependable. I'm not saying that radios that are cheap are not dependable, but yeah, you can get middling results. The next one would be probably the Yaesu FT891. That would be my next step, and that gets you 100 watts, so good stuff. Good idea there. And for me, though, I really like the 705, but I can't necessarily say, yes, this is the perfect emergency radio, because while it is all-band, all-mode, so it would work as a kind of HT replacement. You could use a good antenna. It's a multi-tool of a radio, so it can do lots of stuff. Can be challenging with QRP power, right? It's a portable use radio, yes, but can be challenging. And then other good radios. The entire Yaesu line is really good right now. Really, really good radios. And so is the ICOM line. Again, ICOM, new radios coming out, right? That's 7300 Mark II, so keep that in mind. Boy, we're going to completely run. I thought I would not have enough time. I would have too much time, and now I've completely ate it up. I drank up that milkshake of time that I had for the live stream. I'm not even done. I think I got this one in another slide. Boy, Josh, you really like to hear yourself talk. You talk so much when doing a live stream. So power. Okay. If there is one weakness to a ham in an emergency, it's power. It's a depleting resource that we have to manage, right? We've got to be good stewards of our power. Kenwood is good, but mobile HF, you don't have any right now. You're going to drop big bills trying to get a Kenwood radio, and I don't know that you'd want that for emergency response. Hey, by the way, if you're talking about your base station radio, and you're calling into a disaster to work, to work traffic, and traffic is, literally exchanging information between parties. Go nuts. Yeah, use your favorite radio. No big deal. No big deal. Yeah, okay. So we have to power all our stuff. Most emergencies take out utilities, therefore, kind of difficult to keep them going. Also, because it's usually during a storm where we're encountering these problems, solar is not very effective. So it's always incredibly important, that pink link down, and a link is in the video description, to maintain your battery capacity understanding. I can grab a bunch of different batteries over here, right? A lot of them are small batteries. Like here's one, right? Beautiful little Denko battery. I think this is a 3 amp hour. It's either 3 or 6. Either way, small radio. I can run my QRP radios for a real long time on this. 50 watt mobile? No, not for very long. Can't probably get 50 watts out of this either. The current is not high enough. So go do a test, or go follow the battery capacity calculator in the video description, so that you can plug in things like your radio's ambient receive current draw and your radio's total current draw under max power. And then play around with the numbers and say, I don't know that I'm going to be running a net, but I know that I will be monitoring the net probably most of the time. So 75% of my time will be listening, and then 25% of my time will be transmitting. So you might be okay with a 12 amp hour battery, but then it's like, how long do you want it to run? All those are factors of your power triangle, if you will, right? So it's like receive power, transmit power, and then duration, and there you go. That's how you get your triforce of power. Hey, Dave, thank you very much for the super chat. Very much appreciate you. That's thank you so much. Yeah, so keep that in mind. Recommendations. Just a big old battery, right? And then and I'm talking like a 50 amp hour battery that you just charge up. You occasionally will charge it. If it's your home shack and you want to go off grid with like a solar setup, 50 amp hours, probably more like 100 amp hours, then great. That's fine. You can use that in an emergency. If you're going mobile, though, well, 100 amp hour battery to just lug around is not really great. So maybe it's a 50 amp hour battery, a 30 amp hour battery, and then you back it up with solar. I like Bioenno as just a name brand. There are a myriad of named brands that are available on Amazon for batteries, but I haven't tested so many of them that I know like a brand that I'd recommend, right? So Bioenno's good. We know they're good. What's the other one? Dakota. Dakota Lithium is another one that's a name brand that's trusted. I would be fine recommending them too. And then solar, again, the two that I like. I really like PowerFilm. I really, really like PowerFilm, but I totally know, everybody knows, can be expensive. Really great quality stuff can be expensive. Bioenno has much less priced panels. They may not be the lightest, the most portable, but they do the job. Now, chargers, power supplies, so mains, AC to DC power supplies, all that stuff that you're going to kit out and put in your little Prepper Go bag or your Go vehicle or your Go box, your radio box, whatever. Test all this stuff out. If you go buy stuff, make sure you're testing it, take it to the field, actually set it up, connect it, because if you don't do that, you're not going to know if it works. And waiting until the emergency hits to actually test it is the worst time to be doing that. And it's always going to be that dumb little accessory that gets you. So let's say you got a drop-in charger at home for your favorite HT. But then on a whim, you're like, I'm going to get a converter to take out, I'm going to take my USB power bank and I'm going to use a buck converter, and that'll give me a coaxial 12-volt output. I'm going to throw that in the glove box. I'll be good because I'll have my USB power bank or my vehicle has USB, whatever. And then you leave, right? And you get into an emergency. You leave your fancy drop-in charger at home and you go to try out this thing. You didn't test it because who cares? It's a simple dongle. It's got to work. And then it doesn't work, right? Either your vehicle doesn't put out, it's not a PD capable output source, so it doesn't work. There's a myriad of things where that can happen. So just know that going in is that you should absolutely test all this stuff out. This is also one of the reasons why, to bring it back to home a little bit, to go back to group organization, that joining things like Aries and Races is a really good idea because you're going to get practical experience practicing this stuff. And yes, it's in service to the community for like a race or a fair or a whatever, but it's true to form very much like in a disaster situation, very much like an emergency situation. And the good news is it's going to be a lot more comfortable at a long-distance foot race that you're communicating with amateur radio, sitting at a table, counting numbers as they go by, versus after a flood or a major earthquake or a huge wildfire or a man-made disaster, as we've seen too, or a hurricane, right? So good idea, good recommendation. If you think you're into this stuff, consider Races, consider Aries, links in the video description. All right, literally my last slide. Alternatives to voice comms. Automatic packet reporting system, right? Well beyond position reporting, APRS can send messages to other hams when participating in a well-defined network. Yes. JSA call, VAR AC. I have done multiple videos on this, multiple videos. So go watch those if you want to deep dive those. Those are generally HF. You are going to use that for more asynchronous communication, meaning it's like opening up an inbox, if you will, and then people can leave you messages and you can reply to them so long as you have a computing source of some kind. So it can be challenging. And then WinLink. WinLink is the method that a lot of Aries, Races groups uses to communicate ACS forms and ICS forms. I should show you that really quick before we wrap things up here. So let me pull up one of these ICS forms. Yeah, here we go. So this is the 205 Incident Radio Communications Plan, and you can see it gives you all these different information on what the frequencies will be that they're going to be operating in an emergency. This is the incident comm plan or the radio comm plan, and it breaks all this stuff out. Incident name, date prepared. It tells you exactly what the fields are, right? So you can look this up, although, ICS 205. Right, so, okay, cool. We've got these frequencies that we operate on. What are we going to do with those frequencies? Well, that's where ICS 213 comes in. And so this is where you're going to have names to, from, subject, message, date, time, and then you have approval, reply, and then it breaks the whole thing down. The purpose of the IC 213 is used by the incident dispatchers to record incoming messages that cannot be orally transmitted to the incident recipients. The ICS 213 is also used by the incident commander post and other incident personnel to transmit messages resource order, incident name change, blah, 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 blah. So you get the idea. There's a myriad of ICS forms, by the way. This is not just the only two. There's a ton, and I am not an expert in any of this. So, yes, FL Message, FL AMP for ICS. So there are other tools out there as well. So, yes, you can do that too. Okay. Boy, howdy, I blew through all my time. I didn't realize that happened so quickly. Does anybody have any questions before we get on over to the Discord after chat? Would love to hear your questions, all your questions. Doesn't have to be emergency related. If you need any help with amateur radio, join us in the Discord after chat. Link is in the video description. Make sure you set up a microphone, speakers, and bind that PTT button. And I'll tell you how to get into it when we get started. Yes, it is very good to have a PDF copy of the ICS forms. I agree. Okay. Well, then I'm going to say a big thank you to the patrons. Thank you, patrons, very much. Appreciate all the support that you give. Yeah, this is one that it kind of all hit me at one time. I'm like, it's so rainy. It's going to be raining for multiple days. Now, I want to be really clear. That's not me complaining that I live in sunny California. I love it here. But it is like a desert, right? And so the problem with desert lands and arid environments is it floods. And there are concrete aqueducts all over Southern California to route water away from floodplains. And yeah, we've got floodplains all over the place. And that made me think of the Texas floods. And then that made me think of the Asheville community in North Carolina after Helene. And I'm like, man, we should talk about this. Let's see if, get some more information out there. And I appreciate it. At the end of the day, the most important thing you can do is just get good at VHF, UHF, get good at FM, get good at talking to people, get good at being real chill on the radio, and get good at recording it all. Dan did a fantastic job with legal pads. Imagine what you could do with computers, having some networked capability to send data over wireless technologies. It was fairly rudimentary in Asheville with what they had. What they had was just fantastic. They did a great job. No question, he as a net op deserves just an abundant amount of credit. But think of how you can modify this in your own kind of preparedness, You could do APRS. You could have an APR station at home that your computer connects to the radio, and you can actually send out bulletins to people with APRS turned on. You could do an end-of-day bulletin, a reporting of where people will be dropping off water and supplies. And you can drop those beacons, if you will, using APRS. You can do all of that, right, with APRS. That's just one example. There's a ton of other ways, but you gotta, where is it? What's the freak? You got it, man. You gotta get good. You gotta get good at the radio, and that's right. Get good, says W5MYR. You gotta get real good. Thank you, Interstellar Starman. Appreciate you. And you covered it with blazing speed. Oh, I didn't want to cover it with blazing speed. I hope it was retainable. Do we all think that I was able to convey the information in a way that was valuable? I don't know. I hope so. I do have to get up on the roof now. Not today. I'm not going to do it today. But, we got a month before the Christmas stream, and that lens is real goopy looking. Somebody put the soap opera Vaseline on that lens. I gotta get up there and clean that off. We want to make sure we see all them lights as bright as possible. Okay, well, make sure you join us on the Discord after chat. I'll go ahead and mention it while I'm waiting for this to finish. But if you go to hashtag live-stream on the Discord server, that is the text chat. And then 2 below that is hashtag live-stream /after chat. And that's the voice chat. Set a mic, set speakers, hopefully headphones, and bind a PTT button, and you'll be able to talk to us directly. Why do we want that? Well, because seldom is there a question with just a straight one forward answer, one reply answer, and then we're done. It almost always requires a little bit of back and forth. So, yeah. All right. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I have to figure out what we should... Hey, here's, for the people who are listening, what should we talk about in the after chat? What should the after chat show topic be? I've never done this before. What do you guys want to talk about? What do you want to talk about? Hmm? Hmm? What do you want to talk about? What do you want to talk about? I didn't even get to talk about that ADS device there, that box. Maybe get nerdy with emergency preparedness. I don't know. Who's still watching? Is anybody still watching? 380 people are watching right now. What should we talk about? Don't let those guys that left, they don't get to decide now. What should we talk about? Christmas light half square? I think I might be in for that, actually. I wanted to do another delta loop, but I think that's crazy, so I think I'm going to do a half. I think a half square is the way to go. I don't know that I have enough on the bench here to get nerdy with MCOM, but I definitely have some really good ideas. The school for JS8 and for those that don't MCOM good. Yeah, you the man. Thank you so much. Appreciate you guys. All right, I'll think about it. I'll be back in like 20 minutes or so. So 73. See ya. Yeah, Moxon might... No, Moxon's too big. I don't have the space. Half square probably would work, though. Yeah, I've been playing around with the voicemail system. It's really cool. And actually, there's something on that. You saw it, but there's something on it that a lot of people pass right over when they see it. And I want to talk about it. 7-3.